What is AI actually doing behind the scenes? Every time you use AI, it makes 1,000 hidden decisions. Here's what's really going on inside the machine. We humans like to think of ourselves as pretty smart cookies. After all, we built these giant towers called the Burj Khalifa and wrote software that can make your phone smarter than a human being. But even with all our knowledge and intelligence, there are some things that our brains just can't wrap their heads around. One of those things is exactly what artificial intelligence, or AI, is doing behind the scenes. In fact, every time you interact with an AI, whether it's asking Siri for directions or having ChatGPT write an essay about the French Revolution, the algorithm is making thousands of tiny decisions that determine what you see on your screen. And while most of these decisions are pretty boring, there are a few that are downright fascinating. So in today's video, we're going to pull back the curtain and take a look at what's really going on inside the machine. Stay tuned till the end, because we'll be revealing one secret decision that no one knew about until recently. It's going to blow your mind. First off, let's start with the obvious. What exactly is AI? Well, put simply, it's a type of computer program that's designed to mimic the cognitive functions of the human brain. This includes things like learning from data, recognizing patterns, and making decisions based on input. Now, there are many different types of AI, but they all share one thing in common. They use algorithms to process information. An algorithm is basically a set of rules that the computer follows to make decisions. For example, if you ask Siri what time it is, her algorithm might look something like this. If it's before noon, say good morning. If it's afternoon, say good afternoon. And then tell the user the current time. Pretty simple, right? But as you can probably guess, the algorithms that power more advanced AI programs are a lot more complex. For example, let's say you're playing chess against an AI. The algorithm that determines the outcome of each move involves calculating the value of every possible move on the board, and then selecting the one with the highest probability of winning. To do this, the algorithm uses something called a decision tree, which is essentially a flowchart that maps out every possible move and their corresponding outcomes. Now, obviously, this is a very simplified example, but it gives you an idea of how AI works. Every decision that the algorithm makes is based on a series of rules or calculations that have been programmed into it. That raises the question, where do these algorithms come from? Well, believe it or not, they're actually created by humans. That's right. Even though AI is supposed to be intelligent, it needs a little help from its creators when it comes to learning how to make decisions. For example, when you train a machine learning algorithm to recognize faces, you'll need to feed it thousands of pictures of people's faces so that it can learn what they look like. Similarly, if you want an algorithm to be able to write coherent and grammatically correct essays, you'll need to train it on a massive body of text that includes tons of examples of good writing. In other words, the quality of AI's decision-making ability is directly dependent on the quality of training data that it's fed. Now, once an algorithm has been trained, it can start making decisions on its own. However, it's important to remember that these decisions are not based on intuition or experience. They're simply based on the data that the algorithm has been fed. This means that if you train an algorithm to be biased towards one viewpoint, it will continue to make decisions that reinforce that bias, even if it's not accurate or fair. That's why it's so important to ensure that the training data used to create AI algorithms is as unbiased and representative as possible. Otherwise, we risk creating machines that are not only stupid, but also discriminatory. So now you know how AI algorithms are created and trained, but how do they actually make decisions? Well, it turns out that there are two main types of AI algorithms: reactive and predictive. Reactive algorithms are the ones that are used in applications like chess engines and game bots. They work by evaluating the current state of the game and then selecting the move that is most likely to lead to a win. On the other hand, predictive algorithms are used in applications like facial recognition and natural language processing. These algorithms work by analyzing historical data and then making predictions about future events. For example, a predictive algorithm that is used to detect fraud might look at past instances of fraudulent activity and then use those to identify similar patterns in real time. But what does all this mean for us regular folks? Well, as AI becomes more and more integrated into our everyday lives, it's important to understand how it works so that we can make sure it's being used in a responsible and ethical way. After all, AI is only as good as the data it's trained on and the algorithms that we create. So if we want to create AI systems that are fair, accurate, and reliable, we need to make sure that we're investing in the right infrastructure. But wait, there's more. There's one other important thing that you need to know about how AI makes decisions, and it has to do with something called confirmation bias. You see, even though AI algorithms are designed to be as objective as possible, they can still fall prey to the same cognitive biases that affect us humans. One of the most common of these is confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek out and interpret information in a way that confirms our existing beliefs. For example, let's say you're a football fan who supports Manchester United. You might be more likely to read articles and watch videos that are favorable to Man United, and you might interpret ambiguous calls by referees as being in Man United's favor. This is not because you're a bad person or that you lack intelligence. It's simply because your brain is trying to process a vast amount of information, and it uses shortcuts and biases to do so. And guess what? AI algorithms do the same thing. In fact, confirmation bias is so ingrained in the way that AI works that it was recently given a name: algorithmic accountability. This refers to the phenomenon where AI systems inadvertently reinforce existing social biases because they're trained on data that reflects those biases. For example, if you train an AI system to recognize faces and you primarily use images of white faces to train it, the algorithm will likely be less accurate at recognizing faces of people with darker skin tones. That's because the algorithm is essentially learning from the data that there are more white faces than faces of color, which means that it's more likely to misidentify faces of people with darker skin tones as being something else. This is a huge problem because it means that AI systems can inadvertently perpetuate and even amplify existing social biases. It also means that we need to be extremely careful about the data that we use to train AI algorithms. If we want to create AI systems that are fair and accurate, we need to make sure that they're trained on data that is as diverse and representative as possible. Unfortunately, this is easier said than done. For example, in 2019, researchers found that the majority of images used to train Google's image classifier were of European descent, which may explain why the algorithm was less accurate at classifying images of people of color. But don't worry, there are plenty of smart people working on this problem. In fact, there are entire companies that have been created with the sole purpose of providing AI algorithms with more diverse and representative training data. For example, one company called Hive Collab is working on a system that automatically flags biased language in online content. By using AI to analyze the language used in online discussions, Hive Collab's software can identify patterns that indicate bias or discrimination. This could be used by social media platforms to moderate content and prevent harmful stereotypes from being perpetuated. Overall, it's clear that AI is a powerful tool that can be used for good or bad. It all depends on the data we feed it and the algorithms we create. So the next time you interact with an AI, remember that there are thousands of tiny decisions being made behind the scenes that shape your experience. And if we want to make sure that these decisions are fair and accurate, we need to be proactive about it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content.